Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. We're excited to have David here with us today, David Jesse. Um, David has a great deal of experience as an education reporter and has deep Michigan roots. He's been in the reporting business for almost 30 years, and for about 20 of those years, his focus has been education reporting. He spent time as a K-12 reporter in Ann Arbor, and then after that, he began his illustrious tenure with the Detroit Free Press as a higher ed reporter. Many times and through several strikes, David reported on our very own campus. During his time at the Free Press, he completed 3 fellowships, all in service of deepening his understanding of higher education in Michigan. In 2023, David took on a new role, that of senior reporter at the Chronicle of Higher Education. This new role gives him the opportunity to think about and write about higher education a little differently, with particular focus on higher ed leadership across the country. We welcome him here today to offer a little insight into the current higher ed media climate and what that might mean for faculty, students, and college campuses in general. So, welcome, David. We very much look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks, Bernadette. I appreciate it. It's good to be here. I'm coming to you this morning from near my house, still here in Michigan, just outside of Ann Arbor. And so we are certainly still rooted and interested in Michigan higher education, if for no other reason than I have one son who is a graduating senior this year and looking at various colleges, and then have a second son who's a high school freshman. So we are in the midst of the great college search, which means our mailbox and our email boxes are full of nothing but letters and marketing materials from universities and colleges. So I am glad to be here. I'm going to share my screen here in a second. I have a little PowerPoint presentation for us, if nothing else, than just to kind of guide me as we kind of take a survey of the higher ed landscape, some things related to freedom of speech and academic freedom, and then also a look at maybe why we're seeing it, the crackdown on it that we're seeing. And then take a quick glance and see what we can see about what the future might hold for higher ed. So while I have something prepared and I'm planning to talk and have room for questions at the end, I also am more than happy to take questions as we go and to have this be a conversation. You guys don't need to listen to me yammer for 45 minutes. That's not no nobody wants that. So let me share my screen here and we'll dive in. And I got some weird.
David, I muted you by accident because I was trying to mute someone else. Can you unmute?
Ah, yep. Am I unmuted now?
You're good.
Okay, great. And can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So this is me, David Jesse. I'm a senior writer at the Chronicle of Higher Education. Um, and my email address is there. And if you have questions or follow-up or tips or just wanna chat, I'm always open to, as our other reporters at the Chronicle, to talking to folks, and we love to talk to faculty and to hear what their concern is. So as I was thinking about this, should I speak or not, a survey of the higher ed landscape, I actually thought back to the spring of 2022. And at the time, I was doing a fellowship through Columbia University looking at small liberal arts colleges. And I was writing a story um, about small Christian colleges and kind of the battle over their fate. And when I was at the small school, Grove City College, a very conservative school in Pennsylvania, doesn't take any federal funding, kind of a Hillsdale-ish type of school. Its president was talking with me and about controversy over a speaker they had on campus. And he used a phrase that I turned into, that I also included in the story. And I wrote this sentence at the time. It's about politics brought to campus, witnessed by students who arrived as self-styled culture warriors, armed with smartphones and social media. And that was 4 years ago, and it certainly hasn't changed any. In fact, it's gotten worse. But this whole concept of a culture war at the university and in the classroom is definitely full scale, and students now are arriving, and I don't have to tell you this, are arriving on campus looking for any excuse to fight those wars and growing up in those wars. It's now on steroids. So this is a bunch of tweets from South Carolina from a variety of folks about a situation that we're going to talk about a little later on, right? This is not unusual to see. The Chronicle, the reporters at the Chronicle and editors have a Slack channel that's just called Breaking News. And all day long, people are posting in it. And lots of times, every day, it's post about another university going after, or a group of people affiliated with the university, or legislators going after faculty members, administrators for something that was said, whether or not it actually was in context or not. So now we're on steroids. It's pumped up. Um, this was a story. In fact, we just wrote about this in our trend issue, which is out both in print if you're a print subscriber, or if if not, it's on the website. And I think my colleague Sanal Cutler wrote it, published March 4th. And I love the headline they put on it: "Fire first, ask questions later." And I think that's really what we're seeing in the subhead there. Colleges once treaded lightly in censuring their own professors. Now due process is optional. And so if you ask me what's kind of the overarching, the sweeping thing that's going on right now, is this, right? We're so concerned, universities are so concerned about how they're being perceived, whether it's being perceived by the um, legislature, governor, a political party, the federal government, the Department of Ed, or even just parents and students, right? That they're firing for something comes up, their knee-jerk reaction is to fire somebody and then worry about it later. That, as we'll see a little bit later, has come back to bite them in the butt a bit. And so, but it's certainly going on. Sanel wrote, and I thought this was a good summary, so let me give her credit for it. She wrote, as a rising chorus of conservative activists and lawmakers accuse professors of liberal indoctrination or just plain insensitivity, many college administrators, excuse me, are adopting a newly aggressive stance: dismiss the alleged offenders from the classroom now and deal with the consequences later. What stands out in many cases is just how fast colleges moved in meting out punishment. And I think you see that because they're trying to win a PR war, right? And so the folks who are the conservative activists and lawmakers have really gotten in and mastered how to get out onto social media and into their own conservative media, um, the negative stuff about university, and that pops up. And so the university wants the headline, well, we fired someone, even if they have to go back and admit they were wrong, that and reinstate them. You don't see as much publicity given to that. Um, Good example, Sanal wrote, is Melissa McCall, who was a senior lecturer at Texas A&M University. You probably have heard about that. She was fired one day after the video went. University of California, Berkeley suspended a lecturer for describing in the classroom his hunger strike for Palestine. Texas State University fired Thomas Atler, a tenure professor of history, 2 days after a video circulated online of him talking about anarchy at a conference held by a socialist group. And those are just a couple examples. There's many more. And I think what's striking is the speed, right? One day, 2 days. Uh, you can't do a good investigation in a day or two. Um, as part of my job, I often do investigations of places and people of universities. I certainly, during my time at the Free Press, did a number of them, looking at uh, various universities. Um, it's just not possible to do it in a day. It just doesn't work. And so this is just an example. When you see something with the speed of that, it's an example of the university saying, look, we have our mind made up. The only way to get out from under this is to take action right away. A little history reminder, if you go back to the 1940 AAUP statement on academic freedom, I think that it's interesting to be reminded of what was kind of the standard for decades. Teachers are entitled to full freedom in research and in the publication of the results. Uh, Teachers are entitled to freedom in the classroom in discussing their subject, but they should be careful not to introduce their teaching controversial matter which has no relation to their subject. It goes on from there. Um, and then number three, college and university teachers are citizens, members of a learned profession, and officers of an educational institution. When they speak as and write as citizens, they should be free from institutional censorship or discipline. Um, and of course, that's what we're seeing a lot of is professors getting in trouble for writing or talking outside of the classroom and not necessarily in their position. There were two footnotes that over the years have been attached to this. Um, I like this, and I think this is accurate. Controversy is at the heart of the free academic inquiry, which the entire statement is designed to foster. The passage serves to underscore the need for teachers to avoid persistently intruding material which has no relation to their subject. And then the other one um, it says about the same thing. Extramural utterances rarely bear upon the faculty members for fitness for continuing service. So how did we get there? Well, I think we all know how we got there, right? Um, this is a Donald Trump thing. This is a Donald Trump playbook, right? When you think of what he does, is always on the offensive, right? Always going after people, always trying to get the headlines. And so now you have a generation of folks who have been raised with that. And you see it not only in higher education, but you see it, across industries. You see it in Hollywood. You see it certainly in journalism. Just look at the number of media organizations that have come under fire for just simply reporting. Look at we're in the middle of a war. Look at who is in the Pentagon briefing room now after the Pentagon came and kicked out those organizations who refused to sign a pledge that said everything that they wrote would be run past the Department of War, which obviously is a huge violation of journalistic principles in the First Amendment. So you just see it filtering everywhere. And of course, it really took off after Charlie Kirk was unfortunately and tragically murdered. Um, and you saw a lot of issues after that. This is the Chronicle in the days after the killing of Charlie Kirk, put together a list and turned it into this nice graphic of places where faculty and students and administrators were punished in some way after some sort of statement that people thought was somehow anti-Kirk. And what's striking is you can see it stretches all over the place, right? It's not just an isolated incident. It's not even just in one state, although certainly there are states that did not have anything in it. I would argue that those states probably are more conservative anyway, and so that was just how that was. And so you can see, right, from George Washington University, I mean, the University of South Dakota, Texas Tech, yeah, all over the place. Um, you saw these issues popping up, and it's. I think did I skip one? No. And you can see it coming up. There's a term for it, which is, I think, a funny term. It's called jawboning. I don't know if you guys have heard that term before, but jawboning is the use of official speech to compel private action. It occurs whenever a lawmaker or political official browbeats, bullies, or otherwise coerces somebody into action. And so you see this in when legislators start threatening funding for things that they don't have control over. Now, this has been going on for a long time. So when I was at the Detroit Free Press, one of the things I spent a lot of time covering was the Larry Nassar situation at Michigan State University, right? We all remember that. And you also remember that in the first several months after that controversy, after that scandal broke, legislators in the Michigan legislature threatened to pull funding if Michigan State didn't take a number of actions. In fact, that's why John Engler, the former Michigan governor, was named the interim president of Michigan State, was because of his relationship with the legislature. So it's gone on for a while, but you see it now more and more and more. All you got to do is log on to Twitter and search, just just see what your algorithm will pull up, and you're going to see this lawmaker, political officials bullying people into action. And again, it is a standard course of action now for the Trump administration and members of the Trump administration to use this. So why is it at stake? Well, because they do have some power, right? Legislators set funding, and they can use those purse strings. In a couple hours, later on this afternoon, I'm jumping on a plane and flying out to the state of Wyoming and to do some reporting for a coming series of stories from there. And this last couple months, in January and February, their Freedom Caucus there, which is very powerful and controls a lot of the legislature, um, pushed through a $40 million cut to the University of Wyoming. The University of Wyoming was able to fend that off at the last minute after a closed door meeting with some of the officials. There's a lot of concern that the university gave up, said they would make changes that the Freedom Caucus wanted around courses, around uh, women and gender studies things, a whole variety of stuff in order to keep the funding. But again, it's the legislature, a legislator, a political person using their official action to compel a private action. Penn America just put out a report on this January 2026, and they said the sort of jawboning is a serious problem ripe for abuse. We have already seen it in a range of cases. For example, the removal of a Louisiana researcher who found that a local energy project is poisoning the water supply, or the suspension of a professor in Texas who voiced criticism of how state leaders are handling the opioid crisis. The growing pattern is a reminder that universities must stand firm against external attempts to pressure them into punishing their faculty for protected speech, because the future of academic research and teaching is at stake. So again, you see it happening all over the country. So why is this? Why are universities so ripe for this type of action? Why are they so afraid of it? Well, I think we saw it in Wyoming, as I just said, where there was a potential $40 million cut to their budget, which was a massive amount. Um, but we see it all over. And the leadership of universities and colleges across the country, both public and private, are really feeling that pinch because they're also feeling the financial pinch. So late last fall, the Chronicle surveyed several hundred university presidents, chancellors, CFOs, the people who control budgets, and we asked them a series of questions to see how they are feeling about the coming budget for the academic year. That that data is compiled into, and this is where I have to plug, some of my bosses are happy with me, a special report that's available for purchase on our store that I actually wrote. But let me walk you through a couple of the findings. You can start to see kind of the pressure and why this jawboning this might have an impact. So we asked them, how would you describe the outlook for your institution's budget in the coming year? And when you add in, so there are about 45% of four-year publics who said that with some relatively minor changes, their budget will be sufficient to achieve our mission. But if you combine that with we will need to make significant cuts, 33% said they would need to make significant cuts, and 5% said we face an imminent budget crisis. So the bulk of the universities, the four-year publics, said that they are perceiving that this next budget's going to be bad. Um, that it's not going to work. What's interesting to me is if you look where it says we face imminent budget crisis, so four-year publics, the ones who responded, 5% said that, and only 1% of four-year private not-for-profits said that they face. I mean, we at the Chronicle and other people have certainly reported on the number of privates that have been closing over the course of the last couple of years and the financial pressures that they're under. But this is really the first time we've seen that type of number from the four-year publics that believe they're in imminent budget crisis. Um, And then we asked, the logical follow-up, how do you expect each of the following to affect your institution's budget in the coming year? You can see, I mean, a number of these are federally related, right? So reductions in and uncertainty about federal student aid. 47% said they thought it'd be a major impact, and 32% thought it'd be a moderate impact. I mean, those are pretty high numbers. Lots of people are really worried about what happens with federal student aid. Of course, cuts to the federal research grants, also, right? 51% either major or a moderate impact. And so those are tied the to stuff going on in the federal government and stuff. Then you add in state support, 41% major impact, 22%. And so you can see where threats from politicians really have a chance to find purchase. If you're already feeling like you're going to struggle to meet your budget, you're going to, and people are threatening to take even more away. Um, that can hurt you. As a side note, you'll see one of them decline in overall enrollment, 42% major impact. That, of course, includes um, foreign students, foreign exchange students who are coming, right? A number of universities have reported big drops in the number of foreign students that are coming because of the Trump administration's policies on letting folks in. And this is right. This is what they do is you allocate resources based on all that. What's the impact likely to be, right? 4% said for eliminating positions, 36% said shifting positions, and then this is the big number. 59% said, excuse me, they're both eliminating positions and shifting remaining positions to different priorities, right? And so you can see the financial stress that the universities are under. And again, more instituting. What are you going to do? What are you thinking about doing to get money? Instituting hiring freezes, sharing academic programs with other institutions, outsourcing, reducing salaries. I didn't note that only 4% are thinking about reducing the number of athletic teams, um, which, whatever. So you have all this going on where university and colleges are under this incredible financial pressure anyway. Now you have this group of culture warriors, students, families, activists who are coming into campus looking for anything to do that they can highlight to bend the will of the university or bend the direction of the university to their perceived outcome. And then you have this group of legislators who take the information from the activists, put a veneer of officialdom on it, and threaten to take even more money away from the universities. And so this is why I think when I talk to university presidents, when I talk to university leaders, even in private, there's not very many are willing to speak out. Um, you know, they say we can't. What can we do? We our money is tied up. Um, we need that money to keep going, and so we're just gonna be quiet. What is interesting is maybe we're seeing a little bit of change. Um, there was an article actually this morning in the Atlantic that talked about this. This is also from the Penn report in January, and you are starting to see the courts start to weigh in, and in almost every case, the federal government is losing, embarrassingly. In September, a judge ordered the government to restore the flow of federal research dollars to Harvard. Later the same month, they ruled Department of Homeland Security's attempt to deport international students, in fact, for their pro-Palestinian advocacy, violated the First Amendment, right? In on and on. You see the court system uh, coming back and handing the federal government losses. You see states. Bills going down in Texas and Oklahoma, in California, a variety of bills have been beaten back. Does that offer hope? Is that a trend? I think it's a little too early to say, and it also depends on the state we're in, right? And so in Michigan, um, uh, right now with the divided power structure in the capital, in a state that kind of swings back and forth. Do we face the same thing? Certainly, there have been attempts at some of these, and you hear whispers of them, but I don't know if they could actually make it all the way through. Of course, this is an election year, and this could all change, by the end, depending on which party takes control. If the Republicans, for example, would take control of the House, the Senate, and the governor's race, the governor's seat, you could certainly see things pushing through. As far as the federal government itself, are things changing? One thing we know about Donald Trump is he has a relatively short attention span. Um, for ex- and with the war in Iran going on, and with other stuff going on, we're not hearing as much from him about higher ed. For example, I don't know if you guys watched the State of the Union speech, but if you did, you probably noticed that there was no mention of higher ed in there. Certainly, it would seem that would be, a place to throw some red meat to his supporters, but there was not a mention. What does that mean? I don't know. This could all change. I haven't checked the Slack breaking channel. This could all change, even while we're talking. What is true, though, is that there are going to be continued attacks. For example, in Utah, a bill made it through the House, I believe on Friday, that would allow students at the public colleges and universities in the state to object to a required assignment on moral grounds and require the professors to accept that and without question, and to give alternative assignments or to exempt people from assignments. So that's kind of where we're at. I gave you a bit of an overview, a little bit of a thought about it, and I would be happy to now engage a little bit of conversation, and let's talk about it. I don't claim to have any answers 100%. If I did, I'd be a consultant to somebody and be making a lot more money than I make as a reporter. But I'm glad to help in any way I can. So if you have questions, why don't you jump on in and let's have a conversation.
We do always love to talk about how much consultants make.
I,
We're
I,
all
I,
in the wrong profession.
and I love to write about consultants and how much they make. We wrote a big piece. We went down into North Carolina and looked at what was the form? at one of the firms, RPK Group, and how they did, and what the so we got several thousand pages of emails, and we're able to see kind of inside the sausage making. Very interesting to see, especially because the first email that the university down there sent, I forget which one it was, to the consultants said basically, "We know what we want to do. We just need you for political cover."
Lovely.
So again, wrong profession.
I did have a question first, and then if people want to ask questions, go ahead, raise your hands, and Bernadette can call on you. But if you want to ask a question, but you don't want to say it out loud, you can also just send it to me and I can say it out loud. But my first question was when you talked about the article that Sonal wrote that I haven't read yet, or that map where you showed the sort of consequences after Kirk's murder, was there any is there any trend or noticeable difference between colleges and universities that are unionized versus not in those consequences?
I think the difference is in the ultimate consequence, the ending of it. And so you're still seeing that in in some of the cases where they were unionized, where they were swept out like right away. Like they just learned like, David, you made a comment. We can't have this. You got to go. And then the union has fought for, and you see it in the court cases, then helped the fight for due process, right? And the arguments around the First Amendment and stuff like that. So certainly that's where a union comes in to protect professors in their statement. It isn't necessarily that you won't lose your job. Uh, it's right away. It's just maybe you get a shot at getting it back or getting a there's been several cases where there have been settlements then after the firing. So
Okay. Thank you. Aaron?
Thanks. I guess my question is kind of related to that. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about it as a chilling effect. So, you mentioned that we get a lot of coverage of, this person was fired immediately or pulled right out, but then we don't see much about, oh, they were reinstated or even the process that eventually hopefully goes on there. Because I'm thinking about, in our particular case here at Oakland, like the sense of just like knee-jerk reaction to things as opposed to before they've even happened, right? Before we've even had a complaint or we've had anything, come on the radar that somebody's, upset about a class or whatever, but just a concern that kind of preempts any actual complaint. If you have any data or any just anecdotal kind of sense that there's that going on, that this becomes a way to sort of clear the decks for the things they want to do under the guise of, oh, we got to make sure we don't get in trouble.
yeah, I don't have any data on that. It's hard to survey people and be like, did you not say something because of X, right? Or to get people to admit that. But certainly you're right, where you see folks making changes because of things they think might happen. I traced a lot of this back, maybe a year or so ago. I wrote a story looking at the rising power of the general counsel on campuses. And if you don't think the general counsel is the most powerful person on Oakland's campus or any other campus, you're wrong. They have much more power, right? And so we talked to a number of people for that story, which you can find on the Chronicle. Who said just that. Like you're seeing in even all the way to policy where they're either pulling back policies or simply not putting forward policies around a variety of issues because they're concerned how people might maybe one day react to it. And so I think that's right. When you get into the classroom, I mean, you guys would know as well or better than I do, right? It's in the back of your mind. Is someone going to see what I said and report it? Am I being recorded in some way? Um, you know, I think, I think anybody who is in the public thinks about it. Um, on a regular basis. certainly thought about it before I started talking today. What am I going to say here, and how could that be twisted out of context? And so, I'm not pulling any punches that I know of, but I think it certainly is a chilling effect, and I think you see it more around big events, right? And so, what happens the next time? There is a protest on your campus. Do you address it? And how do you address it and I think you're seeing more and more um, people who are deciding, look, it's just not worth it. I'll just let it go. I keep my job. I'm going to teach my math. I'm going to teach my science. I'm going to teach my politics class. But boy, we're going to stay away from, a lot of these topics, or do it so broadly that nobody can do it, which is unfortunate, right? Because, um, I maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I tend to hold that one of the reasons to go to college and to university is to be exposed to a variety of viewpoints. And if you can't do it in the classroom, where can you do it? So certainly, I think there's chilling effects. It's just hard to quantify that in any true way.
One question I have that kind of goes along with Aaron's about the chilling effect is something we've seen on our campus that we've kind of tried to poke around at other Michigan campuses to see how it's being used elsewhere. So maybe you have a sense of the nation, but in 2024, the board revamped their policy basically about free speech, time, place, and what's the third one? Right, that policy.
Yep.
And there is what appears to be a throwaway sentence. The very last sentence of the policy says, something to the effect of like it may be deemed for public safety that they will need additional police and you will be charged for that. Doesn't talk about how that decision is made, doesn't talk about how much. And we've now had two. The first one earlier this year, there was a anti-ICE demonstration put on by students, and an hour and 45 minutes before the demonstration, the student who'd applied for the permit got charged $847 for police presence. And we had another event we brought in some speakers to talk about how people should respond to ICE in their communities. And they were also charged some large sum of money. So we're wondering if that's one of those chilling effects that universities are starting to use, is this under the guise of safety, making free speech really expensive.
Yes, because in what they do is then they point to the Kirk thing, where one of the criticisms of the college that was hosting him, or where he was at, was that they didn't have enough security. Um, and so they'll point to that and be like, see what happens when you don't have, and we have to have all this. And then that circles back to these tight finance. We could lay two professors off and hire 10 more police, or we could charge you, and so we're just going to charge you because we're committed to the academic core of our university, and so yeah, most definitely. And so now you have to get to the point of who's going to be able to afford to put on events. Yeah, and where can you put on events? And it's interesting not only in places um, like Oakland, but think of other places where in more rural areas where the college is the only thing in town and the only place for some of these conversations to happen, right? I mean, obviously at Oakland is certainly a hub and a lot of conversations, but there are a number of other places around that these conversations could happen. But if you're the only player in town, the only large lecture hall, the only gathering spot, yeah, certainly a, ch- a chilling a chilling effect. And I think it goes, I mean, we've seen this for years, and it's just keeps going and growing and growing. I mean, it goes back to, um, I mean, we saw it at Michigan State when, what was his name? One of the super conservative guys came to campus, and they let him talk, but they had a bunch of police, they're kind of protests, and it devolved into just this nasty brawl. Between everybody. But after that, you see again charges. We're gonna have to spend all this money on police and overtime, and the Michigan State Police were there, and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it definitely has a chilling effect. what's the answer to that? I don't know.
I have
Any
another
other?
question if no one else does. I think this is all like I'm very interested in this. I'm the director of Women and Gender Studies, so this is something that is definitely like hitting, me and my
Yeah.
classes in particular. But I just wondered, when you mentioned about the power of the general counsel, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that, about how you've seen that kind of changing in this idea of sort of policing things like, oh, well, we have to run it through legal before we can do any of this sort of thing.
Yeah, so it's this fear of a lawsuit, right? And a general counsel's job, so their job by definition is to protect the university, right? And that's a good thing. Like somebody should look out for the university. A board should look out for the university. Like that's it's when it starts to be abused. And I think it's in the last decade or so, you just have seen more and more cases of that. I'm just gonna while I
Because
think about that.
I guess related to that is that I find it so interesting that like you're pointing out that the courts are now are becoming the place where we're seeing these things falling apart, but yet we've got this kind of chilling effect coming through the legal council on campus of like, oh, we got to avoid this. But if you look at how things are actually playing out in courts, it's not like we should still be doing what we're doing and not be quiet because we might get sued.
Yeah, I'm throwing that article, the link to the article in the chat if you guys want to go back through and click on it and read it. And I just glanced at it while you're talking and you're making a good point. I think what you see is the general counsel used to be a lawyer in town who had some tie to the university, but he was basically a contracts lawyer, somebody who would go through, cross the T's, dot the I's, make sure that the numbers added up. There was no outrageous stuff. And as they brought that job into campus, now they're in the meetings doing it. And yeah, I'm curious, Aaron, to see if as the courts rule more in favor, will the general counsel start to see that? I don't think we have enough yet for a trend in those cases where they're able to protect. And certainly, we don't have any major Supreme Court case that they could stand by. And I don't think at this point there are very few places that want to stick their head out. Um, and certainly not presidents. Maybe Michael Roth, some of those guys want to stick it out. But even then, you have this massive battle going on at the president level between a bunch of folks who are calling for more advocacy, more forceful condemnation of these actions, and then a whole bunch of folks who are like, we're not touching this. This is our, the whole institutional neutrality coming out of the University of Chicago's a statement. And you're even seeing that codified now. I was talking to a president in actually Utah the other day and his wife about some stuff. And, she was saying that under this law, that their son was working on the campaign of a local politician and he stuck a lawn sign in their yard and they took all kinds of grief about it. And they were like, well, no, we're not necessarily, we're not endorsing this guy. Our son, who's living at home, that's his job. And so, I think you're seeing that too. And I'm very curious. I'm very curious to see where the courts will end up and if there'll be a major court case. I think that's what a number of general counsels will need. But even then, I don't know, right? Because you can win in the court, but in the court system, but lose in public opinion, right? In the PR battle. And now a number of these general counsels are not necessarily ruling on matters of law; they're ruling on matters of public relations, right? And so if someone would come and take on your program, what would the public relations risk be to the university, um, versus you might have a firm grounds legally, Yeah, and so especially as, right, and we're all sitting in Michigan where the demographic cliff is coming, the number of graduates is shrinking, the competition for students is fiercer, and nobody wants to do anything that would upset that cart. They, in so many ways, they want to be so bland that they're not standing for anything.
Cynthia?
All right, thank you. This has been absolutely fascinating. I'm wondering if you could speak to this strange cocktail of an individual faculty's rights as a citizen that are protected by the Constitution versus the obligations and protections that we have as faculty, um, versus what students' rights and privileges might be within the context of the classroom setting. And I'm asking this because it had never dawned on me that I might have a student um, object to an assignment on moral grounds, which I'm always fascinated to hear that these things are taking place, and not fascinated in a good way. And so, again, it causes me to ask, where would I might be able to find what my rights and protections are as faculty, um, as I'm in the classroom, and where are those lines being blurred, or where are those lines more solid relative to my rights as a U.S. citizen that are protected by the Constitution?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's there's not a simple answer to it because so much of it is being blurred. Certainly, your union, I would bet, would have advice or access to documents and things that could help you with that. It's such a tricky thing. Like, where does your right as a citizen to say I don't like Donald Trump, Joe Biden, the color yellow, the Chicago Bulls, whatever. Um, where does that end and where does it yeah and I think that's really going to be the question of the next couple of years is to find out where that is. The argument from the student is, look, at I'm paying for this class. If I want to record it, I can. The other thing is, right, we've talked about public relations before. I mean, have you heard of any students getting in trouble ever for when they come forward and are like, oh, my professor said that, XYZ, and the professor gets in all sorts of trouble. The student, nothing ever happens. There's no blowback ever for the student. I don't know. Does that change at some point? Yeah, does the public start saying, really? You're taking that way out of context. I think these are all really interesting questions. And I wish I had a really good and easy answer for you. Again, see my comment about if I did, I'd be charging uh, tens of thousands of dollars to be consulting everybody. But really good question. I wish I had an easy answer. Let me plug the Chronicle again. We're having these issues all across the country, and it's always a good resource.
And Cynthia, it's a great question to ask before candidates for the new we're not new position, but we have a vice president of student affairs they're hiring for, and we have four candidates coming to campus. So that would be an excellent question. And I don't know if Diane and Jen can speak to it maybe a little bit more. Former contract officer and grievance officer. But what you're really describing, Cynthia, to some extent, is the difference between freedom of speech and academic freedom, because those aren't the same thing. And I think, Jen, are you available to talk about that for like a second? I don't want to throw you under the bus.
Yeah, I'm here. I too don't have that great of a response for you. I mean, we do, we have our right to free speech, we have a right to academic freedom, um, and the courts are stepping up of late. But, as David said, um, the fall we're dealing with the fallout after they've already fired or they've already sanctioned the faculty, and so to get in ahead of that is hard.
And I do think, at Oakland, our general counsel has had lots of authority for a long time. This is not new to us. But it does reinforce the notion that it is incumbent on us to fight legal with legal. Like if legal's how they're going to their justification, then we are going to have to use grievance process, use ULP process. Um, that that seems, out of this conversation, that's the only thing I'm hearing that's effective against these sort of blanket statements of like, oh, the money's at risk. That's always the answer for control. And I see Diane just went on camera. Does that mean Diane wants to say something?
I did not a whole lot, but I mean, the one thing I would say is my limited experience, but I looked into this a few years ago. The court's definition of academic freedom is nowhere close to what academics think it is. Courts usually will be, I mean, they will try not to get involved in academic cases, but when they have, their concept of academic freedom is not anywhere close to what most academics think it is, which I'm protected if I say something is my opinion, and that's not what the court sees as academic freedom. I can't tell you exactly what they do understand as academic freedom, but I know I was very surprised when I started to look into this issue that academic freedom is a concept we throw around all the time as if it's accepted and it's got a great definition and we all know what it means. And that is not how the court sees it. So I think Jen's right when she says, I mean, I think this is a really important time for the union's got to be the one that steps up and helps defend. And yeah, you're going to find yourself, the courts take a long time to get to these issues. And that is going to be a really rough, terrible position for a faculty member to be in.
In some way, it's going to take some definition from the Supreme Court. It's going to take some university that's going to step in, or a union or whatever, and make it a deal and keep pushing it through. In some ways, much like conservative activists did here in Michigan with affirmative action, right?
Yep.
They found a case or two they wanted to go. They sunk a ton of resources in it. They went to the Supreme Court a couple times with the University of all the way to the Supreme Court with the University of Michigan. And now, I'm not commenting on the ruling itself, the merits of the ruling. You can discuss that yourself, but at least there was some guidance given, right? Like it's clear now whether you think that's a good guidance or not.
Right. Well, and then Students Against Harvard has kind of that's an affirmative action. But I would love to see the court be pushed on the issue of academic freedom. I think a lot of academics have not wanted to push the court, particularly this court, thinking that the outcome will not be something that we will like. And once the court has spoken, then it gets really difficult, right? But, at some level, it would make it clearer for sure if the court had actually taken the kind of stand on this that they have on affirmative action. Yeah.
Yeah, you always have to be careful what you bring before a court. We had a lawyer at the Free Press who I always advocated for suing universities over records and open meetings stuff, and we did, and we won some, and in one case we actually lost one. And after that, the lawyer said to me, I think we hurt ourselves by taking that one on.
Strategy is a huge part of particularly Supreme Court cases that most people don't fully grasp, but strategy is a really important part. Do we want to bring this issue before this court?
Right.
Because we have to live with the results.
Do we have any other questions or comments?
I would hate to think that individual faculty members are going to have to negotiate a lot of this on their own, and this forum is therefore helpful, and having a group to represent the faculty is helpful. My concern is that the universities will try to do a divide and conquer to get their way, and students will feel even more empowered. And what I anticipate will happen is that faculty members will negotiate the terrain themselves by just backing off and giving it easier grades, fewer assignments, changing the product that we have offered historically. And that's just my sense of where the future is.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's certainly the opinion of many.
Well, if there are no other questions, I'd like to thank you, David. This was a very fascinating conversation, and I think it's given us all a lot to think about.
Thank, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm always happy to talk. And if you guys, seriously, if you have questions or things we ought to know, my email, we're findable very easily. I know other reporters at the Chronicle love to talk to folks on a whole variety of topics, even ones that aren't as as maybe depressing as this one was.
Thank you, David.
Thank you again.
Thanks.